Now, the fifth step is really about our role, because it sounds great. Oh, I like this idea. I'm going to go online. I love online discussions. But when you're in it, you have to decide as a teacher, what is your engagement, what's your role going to be? Because this is different. In a classroom, a lot of times when we have discussions, we'll stand at the front of the room, or I used to stand at the front of the room, and I would call on people, and they would share their ideas, and sometimes they would respond to each other. But ultimately, everything they said was kind of filtered through me, right? Because they were looking at me like they're answering my question. In the online space, there's not that piece, and I like that because I don't want to be the focus of the conversation. So I have chosen a role that takes me out of the conversation. So it's just my students. And depending on what grade level you teach, how much support your students need, those things are going to impact what role you play in the online discussion. So I'm going to talk about two very different roles, but these are not the only roles. There's lots of gray area in the middle, and you have to figure out what works for you. So there's, on this side, is the involved participant. This is the teacher who actually is responding to questions, commenting on students. They're actively involved in the online discussion. The benefit is that they get to model what really strong participation online looks like. If you have younger kids, if you have kids who need a lot of support, if you have kids with special needs, this can be very valuable. Sometimes teachers will start the year involved and then fade into the background as their students become stronger in the online discussions. The other side of this is the silent facilitator. And this person is the teacher. Obviously, you're designing the questions, you're moderating, you're reading, skimming the discussion, but your focus is really on taking the discussion and weaving it back into the classroom. Taking the questions, taking the comments, and figuring out, okay, how do I use that discussion to drive deeper learning in my classroom? Because that takes a lot of energy and creative thought to do that. Now, there are challenges to both roles. Neither role is perfect. So if you are the involved participant, you want to be careful not to overpower the conversation. You don't want to reply to so many students that your name is everywhere. And this is why. Because if I ask a question as a teacher, and then I'm asking my kids to talk about it and try to figure something out, if I'm part of the discussion, I don't think they're going to try as hard to come to the answer. Because they know eventually I'm going to tell them the answer, right? So I don't want to be the person with all the answers. I want them to come up with the answers. I want to challenge them to use each other to drive the conversation. So if you're part of the conversation, if you're an involved participant, I would limit your participation to what you would expect from one student. So if I expect the student to reply to 2 people, I would only reply as a teacher to maybe 2 people. But I personally chose the silent facilitator because I know my personality, and if I start replying to one student, then I feel like I need to reply to everybody. So I just decided I'm not going to get involved. Instead, I'm going to read their online discussions, and I'm going to use them to design activities that build on those discussions so they know that I am reading it. Because the biggest problem with being a silent facilitator is if you post questions online, but then you never do anything with it in class, and you never get involved in the discussion, students don't think you're reading it, right? So you have to be really clear that you're pulling in examples in class, you're using it to kind of be a launch pad or a starting point for another activity. So you need to kind of think about where you fall, and I would really consider these questions as you try to think about, okay, what would be best for my students? What age level are you teaching? So if you're teaching upper elementary, maybe even middle school in the beginning, maybe they need a little bit more support. How many students are you working with? The first year I did online discussions, I had a total of 162 students. And that is an enormous amount of students for me to be trying to comment. And so I couldn't do it. If I had a smaller group, maybe I would have wanted to get involved, but I didn't. I had an enormous amount of students. What is the goal of your online discussions, right? So think about, what do you want them to get out of it? Are they just learning the basics? Would it be beneficial for you to be modeling in the discussion? Or are you trying to drive deeper thinking for older kids and you want them to own the discussion? Where will they participate? Maybe sometimes online discussions happen in class. For me, most of the time, online discussions happen for homework because students have access to their computers at home. Every once in a while, we'll go into the computer lab and we will have everyone engage in an online discussion. And you might be thinking, well, why not just have them have a real discussion? And I'll tell you why. Because when we have a real discussion, I only hear from a very small percentage of my students. I want to hear what every single student thinks. And I should have said this at the beginning. The very first night that I posted my first discussion question ever, this is 5 years ago, I was very scared and I was waiting at my computer. What is going to happen to this online discussion? Like, I was just waiting for something bad to happen. Within 20 minutes, the first 3 students to respond are kids who never talk in my class. And in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, these kids want a voice. And up until now, they didn't have a place where they felt comfortable sharing their ideas. Maybe they're shy, maybe they just need more time to process, because I go very fast in my class sometimes. And so I throw out a question, if they don't have an answer right there, then they miss that opportunity. So I like to give them all a chance to have that voice. And then how much support do your kids need? Do they need you in there kind of helping to lift the bar and show them how to do it better? So in small groups, I just want to take maybe 3-4 minutes. You don't need to do this on the back channel, just have a conversation. Thinking about online discussions and thinking about your personality, your students' needs. How do you think you would approach facilitating? Would you be involved and post comments to students in the discussion? Or would you be silent? And if you were a silent facilitator, where would you put your energy? Okay, 4 minutes.